What is up, guys? In today's video, I'm going to be going over several tips for controller players in Fortnite. So if you play controller, this video is going to be packed full of useful information that you're going to want to hear. As always, if you guys do enjoy this video, find it helpful and informative, remember to give it a like, subscribe if you like to see more, and comment down below what controller you use, Xbox, PlayStation, which one of those controllers that you use, or Switch, I guess, but I don't know much about the Switch controller. Either way, the first thing we're going to want to talk about is keybinds on controller, because with controller, you want to keep your thumbs on the analog sticks as much as possible. If you have to take your thumb off the right analog stick to jump, then you're not going to be able to aim and jump consistently at the same time. Same thing goes with switch mode when you go to build, and then same thing goes with crouch. So when it comes to controller, if you play builds, you want to be able to jump, crouch, and hit switch mode, and hit edit probably, all while not taking your thumb off the analog stick. So binds are very demanding in build mode. In zero build, I feel like you can kind of get by just being able to hit jump and crouch without taking your thumbs off the analog stick. So the ideal binds, I feel like, if you're non-claw, non-paddles, is having your jump and your crouch button on either of the analog sticks. That way you can press them and you don't have to take your thumbs off of the sticks to do that. However, for the most part, controller is a game which really benefits from you either playing claw or having a paddled controller. I have a video about playing claw, which will be linked down in the description below. Personally, I've played claw for like 10 plus years at this point. It's basically where your index finger, so the finger in between your thumb and your middle finger, is on the AX, BY, or triangle, circle, X, square buttons at all times. That way you can activate all of those buttons without taking your thumb off the analog stick. So you can do all of those actions, building, jumping, editing, crouching. You could do all of that without taking your thumb off the stick, and you can have ideal binds that way. Another option is to go for paddles, which are basically buttons on the back of your controller. I use one paddle right now for sprint, but you can have up to 4 paddles on these controllers. And I am partnered or sponsored by AIM controllers. You can use my code for a discount, and there will be a link down to their site in the description down below. However, I would recommend waiting until later on in the month if you are going to purchase an AIM controller. The last week of November, our codes will be a very large discount. I'll mention it on the channel when it gets close to that time or when we're in that time again. But if you want to get a custom controller with paddles on the back, making it to where you can hit those buttons without taking your thumbs off the analog stick, my code will be a very large discount in the final week of this month. But like I said, I'll address that in future videos. But either playing claw or having paddles is really the only way to have perfect or really efficient binds in Fortnite, just because of how demanding this game is. Another thing is that you want to have as few actions doing multiple things as possible. So I think when the default binds for this game, paddle or toggle pickaxe and switch mode are bound to the same thing, and that makes it to where you have to hold for switch mode or tap for pickaxe, and it just leads to inconsistencies in your game if the game has to think about whether or not you're holding or tapping the button. So you want to have as few buttons doing multiple actions as possible, and that'll make your game much more smooth and much more consistent. Another thing you're gonna want to do is try to be smooth and consistent rather than fast. This goes with like basically anything or any input, but from what I've seen, the controller players or the controller community in so many games, whether it's Call of Duty, Fortnite, whatever, a lot of controller players are like obsessed with having a really high sensitivity and doing things really fast and making it look really flashy, but that really hurts them in the long run because their aim isn't as consistent. Most pro controller players in Fortnite have their sensitivity between 40% and like 55%, somewhere in that range. They're not playing on a ridiculously high sensitivity. So I think having a smooth and consistent sensitivity, which allows you to be consistent, is much better in the long run than just being fast. If you're very fast, but you hit 1 in 10 shots, or maybe you're a little bit slower, but you hit 9 out of 10, it's much better to be the player that hits 9 out of 10 shots. And the same thing applies to building. If you're trying to be so fast that you're just consistently messing up edits or you're consistently messing up your builds, it's actually making you slower in the long run. So I think one of the biggest tips for any player, but especially controller players, is just try to be smooth and consistent. And then that in the long run is much better. Another thing that you can do to be much more consistent with aiming is left stick aiming. So moving your character to move your crosshair to make those small adjustments with aiming. I do this a lot long range with assault rifles, but even in some shotgun fights, if you're vertical, like if you're vertical is already lined up with their head, but you just need to like strafe a bit to correct your aim. That can be a huge difference maker in fights, and this once again goes with every shooter that I've ever played. Left stick aiming is a huge deal, and it makes it much easier to be consistent because it is somewhat difficult to make those small precise adjustments on controller. So throwing in your movement to aid in your aim, I feel like it's just a huge factor, and that like goes to making a lot of great controller players great, and that a lot of like newer players or lesser experienced players don't really think about. They kind of just stand still when fighting. But you want to move your character to benefit your aim, and when you're using both sticks to get on target, you're going to be much more consistent in the long run. When it comes to taking walls or just shooting your weapons, you can abuse turbo building in some ways. So turbo building is when you're holding the build piece button, it automatically places the build, and it continuously places the build. And one way that this is really helpful is when you're trying to take or replace walls. A lot of players, what they'll do is they'll pickaxe the wall and then tap their switch mode button, and then they'll hit their wall button. But unless you have really strange binds, the button for you to swing your pickaxe or shoot your gun is the same thing as your wall button. So if you're pickaxing a wall or spraying a wall, all you need to do is keep that button held and then tap switch mode the moment the wall breaks, because your action or your shoot button is the same thing as your wall button. When you tap switch mode, the wall will automatically be placed, and this is a huge factor in making it better, like making you faster at taking walls. Another way that you can use this is when you shoot a shotgun. If you want to shoot a shotgun and then immediately build, you can keep the right trigger held and then just tap switch mode right after you shoot. If you do this too fast, you'll sometimes end up not shooting, but when you get that timing right, you're gonna have immediate reactions of like just shooting and then immediately putting a wall up. And this sounds so simple, but a lot of players don't do that. They'll shoot their shotgun and then release right trigger and then hit switch mode and then hit right trigger again. But you could just keep that held. You don't need to release it because of the way turbo building works. And this also is a factor when you're shooting weapons. If you shoot your shotgun, you can keep right trigger held and then just tap your switch weapon button. So let's say you have your shotgun in slot 1 and then your AR in slot 2. You can hit right trigger to shoot your shotgun, keep it held, hit right bumper. You'll swap to your AR, and the AR will be immediately shooting. And then if you have it timed correctly, you can hit L1 again and then go back to your shotgun, all while keeping fire button held the entire time. And it'll just make your shots much faster after swapping. And this is something that people used to do a lot with double pump back in the day. And it's also really helpful with shotgun and chrome burst. If you're using the chrome burst shotgun combo, the time it takes to shoot a burst is perfect. It like perfectly takes up the shotgun delay, so you can shotgun burst, and you can keep the shoot button held the entire time, and then you're just hitting the switch weapon buttons, and it just makes things a little faster and a little more efficient. You want to put your shotgun in slot 1 if you're a controller player. This is super important for build mode. It's not as important in zero build, but the main reason why, for whatever reason, is the act of going pickaxe, build, back to weapons defaults you to slot 1. So you could be on slot 5 and then go to take someone's wall, and then after you do this and then switch back to your weapons, you will be on slot 1. It doesn't matter what item slot you were on before. The act of taking a wall, basically, of pickaxe builds and then back to weapon, just doing all of that defaults you to slot 1. So that's why a lot of controller players put their shotgun in slot 1, because when you do take someone's wall and then go for an edit play, you want to be on slot 1. And then everything else just gets arranged around that. And this is where even zero build comes in. You want to set up your inventory in such a way that the things you use in sequence are one swap away from each other. So a typical loadout for me to use this season is prime shotgun, hammer AR, either bolt sniper or goo gun, heals, and then shockwaves. And the reason why I have it set up that way is that I can shoot my shotgun and then swap to the AR and then, you know, spray or do whatever I gotta do. If I snipe, I want to be able to get to my AR in one swap, or if I goo gun somebody, I want to be able to get to my AR button in one swap. So having it one swap to the left of the goo gun is nice. And then also typically you want to be able to shockwave somebody and then get onto a gun right away. So shockwaves in slot 5 and shotgun in slot 1 works out well. If you were doing a more traditional loadout of something like AR, shotgun, SMG, double heal or something like that, you might want to put the AR in slot 5, because it's more important to have the shotgun in the middle at that point, because it's kind of the bridge between the SMG and the AR. But it'll really depend on which weapons you're using, what items you're using. The more important thing is just putting things next to each other that you use in sequence. If you're playing build mode, you want shotgun in slot 1, and then everything just gets arranged around that. That's why you have it that way. In the settings, there's boosts and look dampening time. Some people like these, but for the most part, like I want to say 90% of controller players are better off just having these at 0. And that's another thing that if you look at a lot of different like pro controller players or like content creators settings, most really good controller players don't use boosts and they don't use look dampening time. Some do. There might be some outliers, but 90%, maybe even higher than 90% of top tier controller players don't use boosts and don't use look dampening time, especially if you're a linear player. And then the same thing goes with vibration. There's no point in having vibration on in any controller shooter that I've ever played in my life. The only thing it's doing is making your controller shake and potentially messing up your aim or making things like more chaotic. Now, the odds of it actually messing up your aim are quite slim, but it doesn't do anything to benefit you. The only thing it can do is really negatively affect you. And I've talked about this before, and I've had some people comment about how they need vibration on for whatever reason, and that's fine. But like the previous setting I talked about, 90 to like 95, maybe even higher controller players in any game I've ever paid attention to, whether it's Call of Duty, Halo, Fortnite, Apex, they all have vibration off. So there's not really much of a need to use it. It pretty much can only negatively affect you, so you're better off taking it off. So I would recommend no vibration, I'd recommend no boosts, and I'd recommend no look dampening time in the settings. In Chapter 3, one of the things they changed with aim assist is that if you're just spraying way too much, it'll turn your aim assist off. So if you're spraying at somebody's wall continuously and you're not hitting them at all, and then you eventually get into their box, you probably won't have aim assist. And this was one of the things they did early Chapter 3 to combat spraying, and it kind of makes aim assist really inconsistent. Basically, the moral of the story is don't spray into boxes too much, and if you are going to do this, you want to make sure that you have good crosshair placement and that you're at least tagging the person the moment you enter the box, because if you do hit a shot the moment you enter the box, your aim assist will start to work again. But if you're just spraying in, you don't hit a single shot, and then you switch to your shotgun, you might not have aim assist. So just be careful when spraying into a box, essentially. And then this is also a good time to mention that there's many things in the game that remove aim assist, whether it's bushes, tall grass, the corn, shrubbery, windows. For some reason, if you're looking through like the window of a house, you won't have aim assist when looking through that. So keep all of those things in mind if you're a controller player. Another thing that could be awkward if you're a controller player is resetting builds that you can't see. So if you make if you're on a ramp and then you make a peanut butter edit on your wall, you won't be able to see the edited portion of the wall. So if you end up wanting to reset that, it gets really awkward. But what you can actually do is hit your switch mode button, and this will take your blueprints out. And then with your blueprints, you can actually see the building grid of the wall that is edited and then reset it that way. So if you're ever in a weird situation where you can't grab the edit of a build, going into switch mode will make it to where you can grab that edit. Another thing that's really important on controller is going to be dead zones. This is a setting that not a lot of players understand. Essentially what this is how much you move the analog stick before movement gets registered in game. So the higher the dead zone, the more you move the analog stick, and the game doesn't even notice that you're doing it. And the reason why this exists is because controllers are mass produced, and just the way you use them creates wear and tear on the controller. And this leads to stick drift, or when like the camera's kind of moving without you inputting anything on the controller. If your dead zones are too low, the game will just always be moving without you actually touching it, basically. So what you want is you want to have these dead zones as low as possible where you don't get stick drift. So that might be 8%, it might be 5%, it might be 10%, it might be 12%, but basically you want to find that number. You can go into Creative or Team Rumble and just like change the setting and see at what point the game moves on its own, and then put it one higher than that. And you might have to change your sensitivity as a result of this. You might, if you're on like 15% dead zone and it turns out 8 works for you, you might need to turn your sense down a little bit after doing this because it might be too fast for you. But having lower dead zones makes the game more reactive, and I think in the long run, it's better to just have the best dead zones, the lowest possible you can get without getting stick drift, and then adjust your sense accordingly. And then the final thing we're going to talk about is control freaks. These are little tops on the analog sticks that add extra grip. They add extra surface area. If you see my right stick, this one is larger than my left one, and that makes it easier to move, and the length of the analog stick makes it easier to make small adjustments. I am not sponsored by Control Freaks. I would love to be. If anybody from Control Freak is watching this video, I'm down. But I've used Control Freak since like 2011. I use a high-rise stick on the right stick. And they're like 10 or 15 bucks. You can get them in stores like GameStop, Best Buy, maybe Walmart, Target as well. But as far as like products go that you can buy to potentially have an impact on your gameplay, Control Freaks I think are one of the better ones, and they're also very cheap. So I would recommend checking them out. Like I said, I've used them since 2011, so like 10 years now. I think they're really good. They're a good product. They're relatively cheap, and you can get them relatively easily. It's not like you have to order them from a specific website. So if you are interested in something that could potentially make your aim a little bit better, make it easier for you to make those small adjustments at long range, I would definitely recommend Control Freaks. And that is going to be it for this video. I hope you guys found it useful, helpful, informative. If you did, remember to give it a like, subscribe if you'd like to see more, comment down below which controller you use, and I will see you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching.